So, welcome to Ask the Homeopath, presented by Inner Sea Homeopathy, and that's me. This remedy, Arnica montana, it is probably the best known of the homeopathic remedies. It has this key feature, which is that the symptoms are bruised and sore. Now, homeopathic remedies all come in this pellet form, and this is the brand. The Huaron brand is the brand you tend to see at the store. Homeopathic remedies that I use with my clients, I buy from professional pharmacies, but there are a couple of brands that are available over the counter, and this is one of them. But there are other forms of arnica. There are other forms of a number of homeopathic remedies that people will sometimes use. There's a topical in a lower potency. There are these dissolvable pellets. And there are, of course, different potencies, but the most common potency for an acute is a 30C. And while a lot of people will use arnica topically, there's no real situation where you aren't just as well off using it internally. So I like to start with arnica. I remember once hearing another homeopath say that she had a mission that was to get arnica in every gym bag. And we are going to talk about the 7 secrets. Am I in the way here? The 7 secrets of Arnica montana. There really are more, but I came up with 7 because that's a nice number. And I think what this really points to is this is just one example about the breadth and depth of using a homeopathic remedy. All of these are acute. So we're not even talking about a chronic situation, and arnica, just like any remedy, can have applications in a chronic. So here are 7 ways that you can use arnica montana, and I will explain in a minute. I know some of you have heard me talk about this before, but all of these calls stand alone, how I recommend that dosing. So anytime there is a blunt injury with bruising, and that can be from an actual playground injury, it can also be as a result of having dental work or surgery. Anytime you have that bruising where there's soreness, where there's a trauma, this is a trauma remedy. And so anytime you have a trauma where you have bruising, where you have a sense of soreness, you can think about arnica. But arnica is an amazing first response for concussion, and I know I have given it. And I tend to use the 1M potency right after concussion. I'll give a couple of doses during the day, and then I will follow up with that over subsequent days as needed. Just dry dosing for a concussion is fine. And really, anytime anybody hits their head, they should take a 30C of arnica, because head injuries are cumulative and they can be resolved. Tremendous improvement, even much, much later from homeopathy, although we tend to use different remedies when we get further down the line. But it's not one remedy, one situation, one remedy with homeopathy. So you do want to know, you want to see the symptoms that match the picture of arnica. So concussion, that's another one. Shock. So anytime there is a response, let's say there's an injury that's much more severe, or a car accident, something where you're going to need a bigger intervention or a different intervention than arnica. But when you see that spaced out shock in the old literature, it says sends the doctor away. The idea that I don't need any help, I'm fine, and someone's got a head wound. That is this under responsivity. But there can also be an intensity of fear, but there's kind of a filter. It's like the person's not present. And that's what shock is, right? We dissociate in shock. Arnica will help resolve that and bring that presence back to now. So it's always a good remedy to think of when there is a situation of shock, even something that's very, very serious. Intense exertion or exercise is a kind of trauma on the system. I will take arnica after the gym if I have really worked out hard. I will take arnica after skiing. I will take arnica after hiking. When you feel that, oh, I'm going to be sore tomorrow, take a little arnica. One dry 30C pellet under the tongue is all you need. Jet lag. Jet lag is interesting because it is a disorienting experience. There's a kind of dissociation that happens. You're not where you were. Your body is not where you are. You can give some arnica and bring that back to presence. Emotional distress is also a kind of trauma that you can use arnica for. So you have a very unpleasant interaction with somebody at the store and you can't quite shake it off. Again, you can think of arnica in a situation like this. And then an acute illness, a cold, a flu, where you see the symptoms that we're going to talk about that match arnica, you can give arnica. So arnica is this really powerful remedy. And its key feature, so it's a flower, sometimes called leopard's bane. The key feature is that it has this bruisedness or soreness. And the person will describe feeling sore or feeling bruised, or you'll be able to see that there is this bruised state. And then the mental state, as I said, can have this fearful anxiety, but also an under-responsive apathy. I'm fine. I don't need any help. But it's not a truly okay. So there's what we call, with remedies, we talk sometimes about the primary and secondary response. And sometimes you can see these polarities. So you can see this real fear. Aconite is another remedy to think of with that acute fearful state. But aconite is really, they're terrified like they're going to die. Arnica has an anxiety to it. It's a little bit more subdued. There's fear, but it's that anxious kind of energy. So the causes that usually will bring on the need for arnica are these injuries, upsetting or disorienting events, surgeries, anything that you might think of as a trauma. And of course, there are many remedies that can apply for things that you think of as a trauma. So with homeopathy, we're always looking at, does the constellation match? And this, again, the description of the pains is there's this soreness and a sensitivity. Now, many of you have heard me say, disease is passage. And even a minor injury, one of the lovely things about using a homeopathic remedy for even a minor situation like an injury or an upset is that rather than suppress the state, it allows the organism to adapt and grow and heal through it. Even in an acute, there's a little bit of up-leveling that happens when you use a homeopathic remedy, even for a situation as simple as a minor injury. But when you get into the deeper level of healing, that idea of a journey in the dark, the shamanic journey in the dark, one of the things I've come to understand and why I call my coaching work shamanic coaching, is that every healing, every wisdom tradition and faith tradition has figures who are either central or peripheral, who represent the attainment of great wisdom. And they always take a passage in the dark, often more than once. Often that is the journey. And whether it's 40 days in the desert or any kind of trip in the underworld, the shamanic journey of gaining wisdom happens by being forged in this crucible. And that's what happens to us. That is the gift that we receive when we get sick, when we have symptoms where we are realizing that we need help. That is when we are given the opportunity to go on our passage in the dark, which is where we gain our wisdom and our healing and our superpowers. And so when I talk about acutes versus chronics, It really has to do with the duration and the arc. So in acute skin injury or going to the gym or jet lag, it's generally fairly recent. It's going to run a course. It's going to end on its own. You know, everything from a paper cut to a heart attack has an acute course. But when something is not going to ever fully resolve on its own, you can suppress one symptom, but it's like whack-a-mole, that's a chronic. But the principles of prescribing are the same. It's just more complicated to understand when you're dealing with a chronic case. So that's my little bit of slides for tonight. This is who I am. This is how you reach me. You all know that because you signed up. And that's all I've got to say about my little Arnica presentation.